Hello everyone, welcome to the story of Wishmaster, part 2. In this part, I'm going to revisit some of the religious aspects that I didn't have time to talk about in the first two parts. The story doesn't need you to know any of this, but let's step back and let's think about the religious aspects as if they were real. They partly are in any case. As I mentioned in part 1, Ahura Mazda is real. Well, a real deity anyway. In part 0, I talked about the 2-page introduction at the start of the film. I said that I very much liked the simplicity of the first page. I put it on the screen and I talked about it at length. One aspect of that simplicity is the statement, God breathed life into the universe. I like this very much because one thing we teach children is that living things are different from non-living things. But they're not. There's a list of 7 characteristics that we tell them about, and that makes good sense on a practical level. But it's a nonsense from a philosophical point of view. As far as the universe is concerned, there is no difference between living things and non-living things. And that knowledge comes from science. Everything in our world is made of atoms, and atoms obey the laws of physics. As far as we know, there is no life force or any other supernatural property that can be used to distinguish living things from non-living things. And I know that feels weird and counterintuitive, but it does seem to be true. The atoms in rocks do not constantly make and destroy different chemicals like the atoms we have inside our bodies, but they're not fundamentally different. At the same time, I also think that free will and consciousness remain open questions. We haven't figured everything out yet, and I don't know if we ever will. Right, going back to the opening line from Wishmaster, life means creative energy. It's not referring to plants, animals, or people. It's the raw energy and the laws of physics that make everything happen. Now, unfortunately, that inherent simplicity is challenged on the second page of the text. That page tells the audience a little bit about the plot, and I didn't show that page because I talked about the plot instead. Anyway, the part that bothered me is the line about freeing the unholy legions of the jinn. My problem is, how can the jinn be unholy if, like everything else, they were created by God? Now, one answer is because the jinn have chosen to oppose God, and that makes them unholy. I don't like that answer, though. I don't like that answer at all. So let's try something else. If you remember, we were told that the light created angels, the earth created man, and the fire created the jinn. So another solution would be to give the light, earth, and fire independent creative agency. The fire could then become the unholy aspect. And I guess fire is meant to be akin to the fires of hell. So that makes some sense. But doing that would, in my opinion, make God into a trinity of light, earth, and fire. And I really don't like that either, because it adds complexity that we can't explain. There is a simpler explanation, though, and for that, we have to look into the nature of Ahura Mazda. If you go to the Wikipedia page for Wishmaster, you'll see that the sorcerer in the prologue is named Zoroaster. If you click the link, it will take you to a page about Zoroaster, and you will discover that he was the founder of Zoroastrianism. Now, this confused me a bit because the Zoroaster I was reading about is not the same as the Zoroaster in the film. But in any case, that doesn't matter. They just put that in to confuse me. If you then click the link to Zoroastrianism, it will take you to a page that tells you about Ahura Mazda, who is the Zoroastrian deity. It also tells you that Ahura Mazda has an opponent called Angra Mainyu. The point is, Ahura Mazda is good, but Angra Mainyu is evil. So maybe it was Angra Mainyu that created the jinn. And that would explain why the jinn are referred to as unholy. Okay. For me, personally, that explanation is the best one. There's a lot more material about Zoroastrianism on Wikipedia, so it's there if you're interested in learning more about it. I will put the links in the description, but I'm not going to go into any of that here. As I also mentioned in part 0, my philosophy on life is all about trying to find the simplest explanations and the fundamental ideas. So this dualist approach of Zoroastrianism makes a lot of sense to me. But we've gone way off topic. I've taken a big digression. The whole point here is that in Wishmaster, we are shown proof that Zoroastrianism is a true faith. The sorcerer has a great deal of knowledge of what the jinn is trying to do. That knowledge includes how to stop him by making and using a special gemstone. I can't see how the sorcerer could know all of this without divine revelation. All right, that's probably enough serious talk about God, creation, and revelation. Let's talk instead about the jinn and what makes him tick. For simplicity, let's say that being benevolent means that you want to do good things, and being malevolent means that you want to do bad things. Those are roughly the dictionary definitions, so I'm not saying anything controversial yet. But let's also say that the reason for wanting to do good things and the reason for wanting to do bad things is the same. And again, for simplicity, let's assume that in both cases, you are trying to get something as a reward. And that reward is pleasure. So a benevolent person does good things because it gives them pleasure, which subsequently makes them happy. Similarly, a malevolent person does bad things because it gives them pleasure, and it makes them happy. The reason I put it this way is because in Wishmaster, when the jinn grants a wish, he will often say, "As you wish." Now, if you listen carefully, you can sometimes hear satisfaction and maybe even pleasure in Andrew Divoff's voice. And I wonder if this was intended from the start and it was written into the script, or if it was something that emerged later when they were filming. Perhaps it was just another aspect that Andrew Divoff brought to the role. In any case, I think it definitely adds another dimension to the character. I also seem to remember that at one point, instead of saying "as you wish," the jinn says "pleasure doing business with you," which again reinforces the idea that, like us, jinn are driven by emotions too. What I'm getting at here is that pleasure and happiness could be on a similar level to wisdom. They're universal and they are fundamental aspects of life. There's a couple of other examples that come to mind, and I'd like to talk about those too. One of them comes from science fiction, and the other one from real life. The second pilot for the original series of Star Trek is called Where No Man Has Gone Before. The title refers to a crewman that gains supernatural powers. His powers grow as time goes by, and he eventually becomes almost omnipotent. As he starts to become powerful, he rejects the work of the philosopher Spinoza. He describes it as simple and almost childish. Later on, he gives us the impression that he thinks it is all about power, importance, and pleasure. Captain Kirk disagrees, though, and he thinks that above all else, a god needs compassion. Okay, the example from real life comes from the history of the United States. I'm not an American, and I don't know that much about American history, but I do know that the Declaration of Independence contains something about the pursuit of happiness. Amongst other things, it also mentions life, liberty, and safety. I think these concepts might just be universal and fundamental too. The last thing I want to talk about today is good and evil. Looking up Zoroastrianism on Wikipedia eventually led me to their page on good and evil. The page about good and evil not only mentions Zoroastrianism, but it mentions Taoism too. What caught my eye about that was that Taoism was being mentioned on a page about good and evil. And although Taoism has a dualist philosophy of yin and yang don't contain good and evil. And if you scroll down far enough on that page, you'll see that they tell you that. I think that's quite important. The Chinese philosophers didn't consider that good and evil were fundamental aspects of reality. And that makes sense because the laws of physics don't have good and evil in them either. Now, yin and yang are often described in terms of natural opposites. So, for example, the night is yin, and that's because it's dark and we become passive and we go to sleep. And the day is the yang because it is light and we wake up and we become active. Those descriptions probably made more sense a long time ago, but I don't think they explain enough about the nature of the duality. So I've come up with another way of looking at it. If you think about a game of football or a game of chess, for example, there are two sides, and both sides are playing to win, or maybe just to have fun, or possibly to earn money, or maybe for all three of those things. In any case, in order to win, you will need a good offense and a good defense. Your defense will be more passive and reactive, whereas your offense will be the more active and creative part. In addition to that, it will help if your defenders have some offensive skills. And it will help again if your attackers can help out the defense when it's needed too. What I'm trying to say is that the defense is the yin and the offense is the yang. I think that makes it a lot clearer than defining them in terms of night and day, or even more confusingly, male and female. So I think that's a little bit better, and it adds more clarity to the roles. Now here's a big question. How can the dualism of Taoism come together with the dualism of good and evil? I'll let you think about that for just a few seconds. Okay. Are they actually separate things? Or or can we combine them? We don't really need to think about this because somebody else has done it for us. And the reason I bring this question up is that there's a fantasy and science fiction film that answers the question. It's much more well known than Wishmaster, so I'm going to give you a few clues and you can try and guess what I'm talking about. So this is how the film combines them. The first thing it does is it switches the colours. And the reason for doing that is in Western cultures, evil is often associated with darkness, and light is often associated with goodness. And no, I'm not talking about Star Trek Into Darkness, although that film's title does illustrate my point. So the yin is going to become the light one, and the yang is going to become the dark one. The next thing to do is change the names. The yin is going to become the light side, and the yang will become the dark side. And if you've guessed it, you might also have realized that the Tao is going to become the Force. I don't know why or how George Lucas came to combine these ideas of Western and Eastern philosophies, but he did, and he did it brilliantly. And it's not just the philosophies either. The religions are in there too. Apart from everything else that Star Wars is, it's also a father and son story. And some of the people in Star Wars are deeply religious and they wear robes. They're a little bit like Buddhist monks. They're monks from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and they carry lightsabers. I love Star Wars just as much as I love Wishmaster. They're both really, really great. Anyway, I have digressed far too much. I have a quote-unquote philosophy project that I've done nothing with for years. So if I get that going again, I will go into all of this in a bit more detail. I need to wrap this up now so I can get back to retelling the Wishmaster story. We've had a look at some of the religious aspects of Wishmaster, and we've come up with a few concepts that might be universal. Those were life, liberty, pleasure and happiness, safety, importance, and last but not least, compassion. I've covered a lot more than I originally intended to, and I won't do that again, I promise. Part 3 and subsequent parts will stick to the Wishmaster story, but I'm certain I will have to go back to the philosophy at the very end. Let me know what you think.